Offense continues to be a little bit of an issue for the Minnesota Wild, but today we're going to look at why there may be more goals scored in 2025-2026.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we're diving into the offense as we continue our burning questions series heading into the start of the season. We'll take a very early look at the line combinations and some reasons that the Wild may score more goals this season and reasons that they may either be at the same level or possibly below. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, host of Seth on Sports, and a credentialed media member as well. And we're talking all things offense here today for the Minnesota Wild. This has been a struggle spot for the Minnesota Wilds over the last few seasons as they finished in the bottom third this past year as far as goals go. And if you look at 5-on-5 goals for the regular season, the Minnesota Wild were 29th out of 32 teams with 141 5-on-5 goals scored. All told, they scored 228 goals on the season, which, again, the only teams that had fewer than that were Chicago, Calgary, New York Islanders, Boston, Anaheim, Nashville, and San Jose. So the offense, it's safe to say, has been a little bit of a problem for the Minnesota Wild. Now, there are several factors as to why that continues to be the case for this team. We continue in the wake of the Kevin Fiala trade. The second line has been mostly a spot that features two players and one open audition for trying to fill that final spot on the second line, which has led to a team that has been mostly top-heavy over the last few years and has just not been able to get consistent secondary production from the rest of the cast of characters to support the top options when they produce. That's about what it boils down to since the 2021-2022 season, in which the Minnesota Wild scored just a crazy amount of goals. They were one of the best 5-on-5 teams in the league because they had a second line that could consistently push to keep up with the top line. And every year since has featured a little bit of a decline in the goals department, which gets us to this year, in which is one of the lower points that we've seen from this franchise over the last few years. The Wild scored 251 goals last year. The year before that, they scored 246. And of course, as I mentioned, 2021-2022, they were fifth in the league with over 300 goals scored. And ever since, it has just been a drop in the wrong direction. Health has been a part of this. Health has been a big problem. Key pieces that have missed major chunks of games, which further throws your production out of whack. But there are some other instances in which there are players who are kind of stapled to key aspects in order for their production to be good. So we're going to dive into all of that here today and try to get to the bottom of the answer. Will the offense be better in 2025, 2026 than it was this past season? So obviously Kirill Kaprizov played in half of the games that the Wild had this year. He played in 41 games on the season. And if you look statistically, he still was one of the leaders for the Minnesota Wild in the goals and the points department. He finished third on the team in points with 56. And he finished second on the team in goals with 25. The Wild had 2 players with over 60 points, 3 players with over 40, and the drop from Zuccarello, who was fourth on the team with 54 points, the drop to fifth was substantial. Freddie Gaudreau was fifth on the team with 37 points. Marcus Johansson had 34. Then Jared Spurgeon had 32, and that was it for the 30-point scorers. So there's a lot to be desired offensively for the Minnesota Wild here this past season. Joel Eriksson Ek also missed a substantial amount of games, a player who had been a 30-goal scorer the previous season was cut to just 14 goals this past year. Ryan Hartman, capable of 20-goal seasons, I think is probably where he is most likely to fall. Is around 20 goals in a season. He had 11. So you've got some regression of offense. You've got some other factors at play that have led to the Wild kind of falling off the pack. Now, I just want to try to paint a picture as to what could lead to this Wild offense being better. So Kirill, in the 41 games that he played, he had 25 goals. Even if he plays 30 additional games and gets you 15 more goals, that gets him to 40 on the season. You add 15 goals to the Minnesota Wild's tally, and all of a sudden that gets you to 243 goals, which jumps you up it jumps you up 6 spots in the offense, tied with the Ottawa Senators and the Pittsburgh Penguins with 243 goals. If Joel Eriksson Ek plays more than 46 games, let's say you add 10 goals to his tally, because once Eriksson Ek came back from injury, he went nuts. He had 4 goals in the game against Vancouver, 5 goals all told in the 4 games that he played after. You maybe add 10 to his tally, and all of a sudden you're at 253 goals, which puts you above the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers and right about middle of the league as far as offense goes. If you get Ryan Hartman up to 20 goals, that's 9 more. That gets you to 262, which puts you ahead of the Edmonton Oilers and puts you into the top third of the league. And so on and so forth down the line. If Vladimir Tarasenko comes in and becomes a 20-goal scorer, that would be +9 over what Marcus Johansson provided to the lineup, and that gets you to 271, which puts you ahead of the Buffalo Sabres and puts you into the top 10 in the league in scoring. Now, this is a very, very rough cut, but I'm just trying to illustrate a point that it's there, and you could argue that it is more so there depending on how the lineup looks and depending on what happens with key pieces of it. So we're going to play a little regression or progression at the end of the show today, but just kind of wanted to go broad strokes to start in talking about the offense. 5-on-5 has been a struggle over the last few years, to say the least. But again, I think we can trace that issue to the lack of a bona fide second line to be able to push a fourth line that has routinely featured AHL players and a third line that for a large portion of the season was providing defense only. You factor all those things in, and yeah, your offense is probably going to struggle a little bit. Now, there are ways to improve this, certainly. And I wanted to just take an early look at the line combinations. I don't want to get too hung up on them because we haven't even hit training camp yet. And there are going to be a bunch of different combinations that are deployed. But I want to just talk through kind of what the initial line combinations could provide for this Minnesota Wild team. So we'll take a peek for the line heathens, what the lineup is looking like here at this point. That is on the way as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money, the all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Once again, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We will be announcing our coverage plans for the season. Stay tuned for that because we do have some very, very cool things coming up here for the 2025-2026 season. Just ironing things out a little bit before we announce them. So stay tuned, be on the lookout, and more information coming in that regard. So let's get back to the offense. We're talking offense here today. Can the offense be better for the Minnesota Wild in 2025-2026 than it was last year? According to the Daily Faceoff, the early line combinations are as follows. Kirill Kaprizov, Joel Eriksson Ek, Matt Zuccarello, Matt Boldy, Marco Rossi, Vladimir Tarasenko, Liam Ogren, Danila Yurov, Ryan Hartman, and Marcus Foligno, Nico Sturm, and Yakov Trenyan. And those line combinations are fine, but I do want to point out a couple of things, just a couple of thoughts for the Minnesota Wild to consider, and for John Hines especially to consider when putting these combinations together. Amongst line combinations for the Wild last year, the Kaprizov, Eriksson Ek, Boldy combination, once again, one of the leaders in the clubhouse as far as the offense goes. They had an expected goals percentage of 66% in their short duty. But a couple of other combinations were not far behind. Matt Boldy, Marco Rossi, Kirill Kaprizov had a 60.4% expected goals percentage. And Kirill Kaprizov, Marco Rossi, and Matt Zuccarello had a 53% expected goals percentage. Now, those are expected. What did they do for actual goals this past season? And the results may surprise you a little bit. The combinations that were the most successful for the Minnesota Wild this past year, in fact, featured Matt Boldy, Marco Rossi, and Matt Zuccarello was one of the more successful combinations for the Wild this past season at 3.45 goals per 60 minutes. Now, that isn't in a ton of it's not in a ton of minutes. I have the parameters set with a minimum ice time together of 50 minutes. But The Boldy-Rossi-Zuccarello had 3.45. Kirill Kaprizov, Marco Rossi, and Matt Zuccarello had a 3.75 goals for per 60 minutes in 286 minutes of ice time. So that's a pretty good sample size for production. They scored 17 goals for in 27 games played together. So let's say the Wild go with that combination to start. Well, what are we going to get from Matt Boldy and Joel Eriksson Ek? Well, hopefully it is some level of production from Vladimir Tarasenko. And I don't think it's overstating it to say that Vladimir Tarasenko is going to be one of the most watched players in the early part of the season for this team. Because that second line spot had been place held by Marcus Johansson for the last couple of seasons. And the numbers for the numbers for that combination are not terrible. Marcus Johansson, Joel Eriksson Ek, and Matt Boldy played 144 minutes together. They scored 7 goals and were responsible for 3 goals against. So that's a 2.9 goals for per 60 minutes and 1.24 goals against. So obviously the defense is nice there. But the offense, 2.9 is slightly below average, with 3 goals per 60 minutes being the average mark. So you want to try to get something that is a little more elevated than that, and is just going to give you that consistent second punch from that second line that can go nicely with what Kirill, Marco Rossi, and Matt Zuccarello are doing. Now, I looked at Vladimir Tarasenko's statistics from this past season to see if there were any parts of the year where he maybe had a little better month than others, and the answer to that is no. His single high for a month as far as goals go was 2, and he did that in the months of October. He did that in the month of January. He did it in February. He did it in March. And that was it. So I guess you could say February was his most productive month because he had 2 goals and 2 assists in the 8 games that were played in February. So he was at 0.5 points per game. But this is why I said that it was a gamble for the Minnesota Wild to acquire Vladimir Tarasenko, because that is a very important spot in the lineup. Now, you are hoping for a change of scenery to kind of jumpstart Vladimir Tarasenko, but the line that he was most frequently played with, it was Tarasenko, Comper, and Berggren. And that combination had a 1.73 goals for per 60 minutes. They had 7 goals for in 35 games. Now, he played with Kopp and DeBrincat as well. That combination had a 3.24 goals for per 60 minutes. They scored 5 goals in 12 games together. That was in 92, just under 93 minutes together. But he played with Lucas Raymond and Dylan Larkin for a minute, and that combination got outscored 9-3. He played with Berggren and Kasper. That combination got outscored 6-3. He played with Rasmussen and Comper. That group in 13 games had 1 goal for. So all of these different combinations were just not super successful with Vladimir Tarasenko as part of them. Now, the Wild are saying that there just was not a good fit for Tarasenko in Detroit, and based on the numbers, Bill Guerin is absolutely right. But if you are going to have Vladimir Tarasenko play with players like Raymond and Larkin, you want that combination to be a little more successful, no? Like you want them to have some success together. And it could be too that combination just was not good defensively, which kind of blew up what they were trying to do offensively. Tarasenko is a shooter. And if Matt Boldy can be a playmaker for him on that line combination, and you got Joel Eriksson Ek doing his thing in the middle, it certainly could work. The Wild, however, need it to work. And if it doesn't, then you're going to have to try some other things to jumpstart that combination and get yourself to where the offense is kicking and humming. It's going to be a very big struggle for this team again if you're trying to, do it all with one line combination that works. So that second line wing spot is maybe the single most important position on this team, because I think that controls the entire flow of the offense. If that spot is able to be productive, if Tarasenko is able to be productive in that spot, or if somebody else is able to be productive in that spot, all of a sudden, boom, you've got your second line. You take some pressure off the top line, and that to me says goals, goals, goals. So it'll be interesting to see what they do for combinations. Honestly, I've said this before. I don't know that they'll necessarily do this, but I do not mind Ogren, Yurov, and Hartman one bit. I don't mind that combination one bit. And if you give Tarasenko the early part of the season to see if he is capable of playing in that spot, if he holds the fort down, that's a good thing. If he holds that spot down for most of the season and he excels there, I am to the point where would it be nice to see different players get elevated into that spot, such as Liam Ogren or Danilo Yurov? Yes. But a deep team that is capable of beating you with multiple lines is the goal right now. If Tarasenko doesn't lock down that spot, then plenty of other players are going to get an opportunity to do so. And it's all about just taking advantage of that moment. Now, if Tarasenko doesn't hold the fort down on that spot, then he is certainly a candidate for regression. We've talked about this a little bit so far this offseason, but I wanted to just play a little game of regression or progression with where the lineup is at, whether players are going to meet their expectations as far as statistics go, exceed, or fall short of. We're just going to roll through the lineup, and we'll see kind of where we end up with key pieces for this Minnesota Wild team. That is on the way as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wilds after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Again, if your $5 bet is right, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You can use those bonus bets in a variety of ways. For instance, if you feel strongly about the Minnesota Vikings winning the NFC North, you can throw a futures bet down on that. If you feel strongly about them handling the second half against the Chicago Bears on Monday night, you can play the second half over during the game. Live betting is certainly the way to go. And that's just the tip of the iceberg as far as options go at FanDuel. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss out on any new episodes or new content throughout the week. Let's discuss the possibility for regression or progression. I'm just going to go through the expected lineup again, according to Daily Faceoff. This is not the end-all, be-all. And already, based off of what the Daily Faceoff is doing, I would swap Marc-Andre and Joel Eriksson Ek. So we'll see. Progression or regression. And I think the first two names that we'll talk about, Kirill Kaprizov and Joel Eriksson Ek, are progression candidates because of the amount of time that they missed on the ice. 41 games for Kaprizov, 46 games for Joel Eriksson Ek. So their offensive production was substantially lower than it had been the previous couple of years. And I think as long as they beat those games played, as long as Kirill plays more than 41 games, and as long as Joel Eriksson Ek plays longer than 46 games, I think they both exceed those numbers. So I think they will both progress in hitting those numbers that they hit this past season. I think as long as Joel Eriksson Ek can get you to 70, 75 games, I think he is a lock for 20-plus goals. Cinch for 20-plus goals, probably closer to 25. So I think he will progress back to where he's been. And Kirill Kaprizov, what more do you say? He was on pace for a 50-goal, 120-point campaign before he got hurt. So put him in the progression column as well. Which leads me to Zuccarello. This is an interesting case because if you look at Zuccarello's production, it has been heavily tied to the power play. He had 3 goals and 16 power play points this past season, and that actually was substantially less than what Zuccarello had done the past few seasons. Zuccarello had, in 2023-2024, he had 5 power play goals and 33 power play points on a season in which he had 63 total points. So he had 7 goals and 30 points total in 5-on-5 play in 69 games. This past year, he had 16 power play points and 3 goals. So he had 16 5-on-5 goals, or, even strength goals. And he had a total of 38 even strength points, which is better than he did the previous year. I have been saying the last couple of seasons that we are due to begin to see the decline for Matt Zuccarello, and he has to this point been able to kind of keep it at bay. But a big question mark for this season is going to be, how does Matt Zuccarello do when he is not on the power play and when he is not with Kirill Kaprizov? If he's with Kirill for most of the season, then that means that lineup is productive. That means that the rest of the lineup has stayed healthy and has been productive themselves. So if he spends most of the season with Kirill Kaprizov and you don't have to feel like you don't have to do it out of necessity, you're doing it because that combination is playing well, then then his production could certainly jump. I'm going to hold on Matt Zuccarello. I think there is a better chance that he regresses than progresses, but I want to kind of wait and see what the rest of the lineup looks like for the Wild before making a full determination on that. Matt Boldy and Marco Rossi are certainly progression candidates, especially after what Boldy did in the postseason. Very excited to see what he has in store this season. And Marco Rossi has done a nice job of progressing the last couple of seasons. Although I'm just going to throw this out here, and I know he didn't have a ton of help. In the final 25 games of the season last year, Marco Rossi had 4 goals, 11 total points, and was a minus 14 on the season. So if you want numbers to look at as to why things played out the way they did at the end of the year, that's the numbers that the coaching staff, that Bill Guerin are looking at. It's not all his fault. I'm not attempting to paint him in some light that he was the reason to blame. He was the blame point. Numbers are numbers. But I still think that Rossi stands a real good chance to progress to another level based off of his numbers this past year. Vladimir Tarasenko, if he progresses, if he returns to form, that's a big boost for the Minnesota Wild. Honestly, if Liam Ogren and Danil Yurov meet expectations, that will be enough for me this year. Ryan Hartman, I think, depending on where he slots into the lineup, I think he certainly could get back to what we have come to expect. The last couple of years have featured injuries and inconsistencies, and we're about due for a year for Hartman to just worry about the production and not have to worry about everything else that comes with it. And as far as the fourth line goes, Marcus Foligno, Nico Sturm, and Yakov Trenin, I would say regression unless Marcus Foligno stays healthy again. If he stays healthy for another season, he could certainly do what he did again this past year. Trenin is Trenin. Doesn't give you a ton offensively, really doesn't give you anything offensively. And so probably regression there. And then Nico Sturm, again, meet the expectations. And that will be plenty in my book. As these guys get older, the likelihood that their numbers kind of take a little bit of a hit just increases. The body gets older, gets harder to rebound from injury and what have you. So if they can just simply meet the expected level for them, then this team should score more goals by simply being healthy this season. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Do you think the offense will be able to score more goals this year? Do you think they'll struggle once again? Do you think there's no hope for the team whatsoever? Whatever your thoughts are, leave them in the comments. Always enjoy interacting once the episode is done, which it is right now. That's all we've got for today's show. Once again, make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.